All right, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today we've got an exciting episode with Brandon Hamm, and Brandon is an attorney and shareholder at Koley Jessen, and he provides an interesting perspective on the industry and being an advisor to clients. He obviously operates in that environment for his clients, and it's a great conversation about how we can become more of that advisor to all of our clients in our industry and relate it to what he does on a daily basis. So enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast, where we focus on breaking down risk management problems bit by bit until we find a solution. If you would like to discuss anything you hear on GPP with us, please reach out using the links in the description. Enjoy today's episode.
All right, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what's going on?
Staying busy.
Yeah.
It's a busy world right now with uncertainty on taxes and everything else. So
That's the truth.
That always keeps my area of practice very busy.
I can imagine.
Totally. Well, I think that'd be a good spot to start maybe for everybody listening. Just maybe your background, what you do on a daily basis, a little bit about Koley, so kind of people know who we're talking to, and then we'll kind of dive in.
Sure. So I work at the law firm of Koley Jessen in Omaha. We're a pretty good-sized law firm. We have about 100 attorneys practicing in a whole bunch of different areas.
You guys have that many now?
Yeah, we just added like 8 or 9 more last week. We're growing fast.
Wow.
We have this one location here in Omaha, and I've been with Koley since day one of my practice, about 16 years ago, I think. 16, 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All I've done since day one has been estate planning and business succession planning. So kind of the personal side of planning, doing kind of traditional, wills and trusts and estate planning work. But a lot of our clientele is, I'd say, kind of high net worth, ultra high net worth clientele, lots and lots of business owners, and that's how they've built their wealth. And so the personal planning inevitably spills into tax planning, wealth transfer planning, business succession planning. But being at a fairly large firm with lots of other specialists in other areas, we have the ability to kind of take clients that have needs outside my area and kind of get them handed off to specialists, whether it's litigation, corporate, you name it.
Yep.
We've got folks that kind of cover all gamuts of the legal field. So anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think you in particular, just in who you work with, being business owners or a lot of business owners, but then in your particular practice, I think does give a perspective to our audience just around, you have to be an advisor, right? You're talking about transitioning businesses, you're talking about transitioning wealth, and there has to be a deep understanding of your client in order to do that. And, different than other practices in the law field, right? So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit and just how you go about that and how that approach works.
Sure. At the end of the day, we're counselors, advisors. That's all we do. We do not push products. We don't get paid commissions. We collect no fees other than the time for our, energy and expertise in guiding a client.
Yep.
We are fiduciaries, so we have to act in their best interest. We're bound by ethical rules to do that. And so it is as pure of kind of advisory type of focus as you can get.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've been looking forward to having you on, Brandon, because, as we chatted before the podcast,
The podcast episode before the podcast?
Yep, that's right. The risk management industry is not that way, right? We're on a crusade to try to change the way that people are thinking about that. But, has the law industry, always been like that? Or has it transitioned to kind of this advisory model? And then just what are your thoughts from how you see it in your chair about the risk management industry as a whole?
So I'm no historian of the industry, the legal industry, but it's my perception it has been that way since, ancient times.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting in our field. It's a regulated field.
Yeah.
You obviously have to be licensed. You have to go to law school. You have to take the bar. You have to be admitted to the bar in a state, and you're bound by ethical rules. And you can be disciplined and you can be disbarred if you're not acting in the best interests of your clients. But even beyond that, like there's some interesting aspects that kind of ensure that the legal industry is solely focused on kind of that fiduciary responsibility. And I tell you, that is the absolute fundamental kind of thing to understand about the law that you're taught kind of day one in law school is you are acting in the best interests of your clients. And it goes so far, at least in the United States, to say, you cannot own a law firm unless you are a licensed attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Cross the Atlantic Ocean, and they're beginning to allow non-licensed individuals to own law firms, which then all of a sudden raises this question about, well, whose best interests are you looking after?
Yeah.
Is it,
The
are you
business
driven by
owner's lifestyle.
profit?
Yeah.
Or are you driven by the client's best interests, which may not mean profit for the law firm? Here in the United States, we are still, as far as I know, every jurisdiction, all 50 states, you still have to be a licensed attorney to be an owner of a law firm. We'll see if we fast forward kind of a decade or 2 decades from now whether or not that dynamic shifts where you've got private equity owners of law firms that are much more profit driven.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of, you think even more kind of from a macro level, and that drives that focus on acting in the client's best interests at all times.
Elliot, what's it take to get into the risk management business? When he
you
was
take-
rattling all that stuff off?
Yeah, take a quick test. That's about it.
Shit.
And you're dangerous then at that point, huh?
Well, yeah, but it's exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, when you compare the two industries, we talk about this a lot. The risk management industry is set up to protect people from financial harm, right? Now, you can never predict everything, right? An insurance policy can't cover everything. But at the end of the day, that's our goal, right? And then on your side of the business, when you talk about the education you guys have to go through, and you have to go to school for it, and I mean, there is now, and be admitted to the bar and everything.
Yeah.
There is now, but when I was going to college, there was not an insurance and risk management degree or program that you could go to college for, and and then you just basically have to self-study for the test, pass. You're good to go.
Is there any sort of kind of character and fitness requirements or anything like that?
Nope.
Background criminal checks?
There's some of those, yeah.
I mean, you can't.
Like, even to sit for the bar. Like, well, to get into law school, you have to apply, and they do background and criminal checks. And I think you have to, have some letters of rec and all that. But to take the bar exam, once you finish, and after you incur all that debt, there's like character and fitness requirements,
Mm-hmm.
and they study you and make sure you're a decent person, because they don't want you taking the bar, let alone be admitted to the bar, if you're not going to kind of uphold this certain standard.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that is because the industry it's advice driven. Let's just say. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing. You're interpreting contracts, and I'm giving your advice. You're advising the client on whatever they're coming to you for, right? The insurance industry is the exact opposite. I have a product from Travelers, State Farm, Nationwide that you may need. I'm the in-between to say I can facilitate that transaction and a product sale. And that's what we're just passionate about changing is the product is there. The product serves a need. We just need to figure out how do we advise the client on whether it's the right product or just other strategies they need to implement. Maybe it's engaging an attorney to review XYZ because that's such an important part, and an insurance policy isn't going to cover that.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, you'd asked the question, how is the industry viewed?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's likely viewed as transactional
Mm-hmm.
and kind of a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's driven by the fact that you can watch a football game on Sunday and you'll see about 27 commercials about, Geico, Progressive.
Save money
just
in 15
save money
minutes.
in 15 minutes compared this
Yeah.
solution against this solution and this solution is purely driven on price.
Yeah.
That's it.
100%.
That commoditizes the industry,
Yeah.
and it seems very transactional.
Which is, I don't know this for sure. Like we've talked about this in the past, and there's an episode that Andy and I are having the same conversation. I'm like, why? It has to be profitable for the companies, but it completely puts the guys that are in the middle that are trying to provide advice like we are the right way in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many times we have the conversation on a day-to-day basis about comparing coverages that could literally change somebody's life. What the commercials don't talk to you about is how your homeowner's insurance liability coverage follows you around the world for different things that you're liable for, could be liable for. Like, it's one of the most important coverages that you can have nailed down. And if you're focused on price, you're completely missing the boat.
Yeah.
But none of that education is happening. Our public is dramatically uneducated from a risk management standpoint. And it's so siloed on who and how the advice is delivered, it's frustrating.
It's interesting what you just said, because as you were talking about that, I was thinking that, the way you guys are approaching risk management, the perspective you have on it, in that kind of, you want to have a more holistic conversation with a client about it, is probably not for the average Joe out there who's watching the game on Sunday and just needs some car insurance, right? Or just needs homeowner insurance. But what you just said kind of puts my thinking on its head, in the sense that maybe it is more applicable to the general public than I realize, than most people realize. But even that said, my guess is that your sweet spot would be folks that have more going on than kind of the average Joe, just the average W-2 employee, like business owners that have employees, that have, health insurance needs, that have reputational risk, that have, fire damage. That have a lot of equipment out there. There's more to worry about there.
Right.
Their risk profile is far, far greater than just, an hourly employee.
That's right.
At, ABC company that's a W-2 employee that owns a home and a couple cars.
Yeah.
Your comment about homeowners and coverage, you can have a bare bones, or you can have something that provides a little more coverage. Yes, I get it, and that applies. And we probably are, as a public, general public, very uneducated about that.
Yeah.
But where are you going to be able to bring the most value is probably somebody that's got more going on than kind of the average Joe out there, I suppose, right?
That's true. 100% accurate. It's just, it's about how, at least in my opinion, it's about how advice is delivered. Because you're right in that, like, we have the ability to help someone who has a more complex situation because of our business model and how we've structured, like, solutions around those folks. But we have also developed the solutions to help folks with the home and 2 cars. They just don't want to hear it as much as the business owner who, like, they don't understand it, because the conversations boil down to, like, if you hit the kid on the bicycle at the corner of the street and you have $500,000 of liability insurance, or an uninsured driver hits you and you don't have under and uninsured coverage, like, you're in trouble. Like, those things are different than sitting down with a business owner and talking to them about their livelihood and their income and, profit.
And the
and
livelihoods of their 100 employees.
Yeah,
and their
like,
families.
yeah, it's different. And there's not TV commercials that are centered around how, Berkshire Hathaway 3 is probably the best example, or most recent. They came out with a product that has, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 different coverages on 3
One
pages,
Yeah.
basically, right?
The idea was just simplifying the whole insurance policy.
So if you're a small business owner, you get liability coverage, work comp, and
I don't remember the 3 that were in there, but I think it was property. Property was in there.
yeah,
It's like property, liability, work comp were all wrapped into one.
and they cut out the broker in the middle and went directly to the consumer to try to facilitate that. And but other than that, like, there's no messaging to those companies and everybody else to, hey, save 15% in 15 minutes or more. The brokers have driven that message more than anybody.
It's interesting. I mean, you talk about like changing the conversation in the industry, like, disrupt this momentum, this inertia, and it sounds like what'd you call it, Berkshire 3 is an attempt to do that, but it's still not in kind of an advisory capacity. It's still a product. It's product driven. Right. Whereas you guys are coming at it from a different perspective about guiding and advising somebody on a more holistic basis to be thoughtful about kind of this big picture.
Well, it's silly to think that those are your only risks.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Yeah.
I was thinking for a business owner, like business continuity, like the
Oh, yeah.
place burns down, like who's
do you
going to
do?
keep paying this?
So our philosophy is we should be positioning ourselves so hard in this industry that it doesn't matter what the products are or where they're at. If we're providing valuable risk management service, like you provide valuable legal advice, then if we can get paid for that, then go to Berkshire and buy the product. Or go to Amazon and buy the product.
Yeah, well, you guys can help identify the product that fits. And
Correct.
maybe it is Berkshire 3 plus these other coverages that you can get from these other providers.
Exactly. So, we don't view that as much of a threat, but the industry should, because, they're not positioned that way.
It's interesting how much of the work that an attorney does is risk management. And really, you think about all the professional advisory services, whether it's, tax and accounting, investment management, life insurance, obviously professionals. I deal with a lot of just kind of pure life insurance professionals in the work I do, and attorneys. So much of the work we do is about risk management. And I can certainly speak to the legal field. We manage a lot of risk. I mean, that's yes, we identify opportunities and we guide and advise, but tons and tons and tons of what we do is trying to manage risk. And it's funny. We work with a lot of really, really successful, wealthy business owners in our practice, and sometimes you're like, man, I'm smarter and I work harder, and man, look at what this guy's got.
Yeah.
And but at the end of the day, most attorneys are risk averse.
Yeah.
These guys have achieved great success because they're willing to put it out on the line, right?
Well, half the times I don't know it.
Yeah.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, or
I know
they
people
started it when they were young and they didn't have anything to lose anyway.
Yeah, their perspective of risk is different because they're in it every day. It's weird. I know.
But it's interesting that we're here talking about, the risk management industry, because I got to tell you, a ton of what I do every day, whether I think about it as risk management or not, is managing risk.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's how. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to relate it a little bit to your industry as I think about kind of how you were talking about that. I guess I would relate it to there's services out there now that will do a will for $500 or do an estate plan for next to nothing.
Yep.
And they're kind of, I would call them canned products, canned solutions, right? So, and then we think of what the process that, we've worked with you guys on with clients is very different than that. It's very much a discovery process. We want to understand the needs and wants of the client and everything. So I'd be curious, I relate that to what we've been talking about where you can just sell the product on insurance, or you can try to, even though there's a product involved, the will, the estate plan, the insurance product, we want to go above and beyond that, providing that advice. So just be curious, how you look at that correlation in your industry, and then what you guys do differently that shows the client additional value, if that makes sense.
Well, it's the answer is in part what led me to make my comment a few minutes ago about commoditization.
Yeah.
And how probably kind of your ideal client that you work with, where you feel like you can really move the needle and add value, there's more complexity there. The solution is not as simple as, oh, well, this is the cheapest car insurance I can get. We are dealing, to your point, with commoditization in my industry, the legal industry as a whole, but certainly in my field of practice, trust and estates and estate planning. You can go on LegalZoom. You can do an estate plan for, I don't know, $250, $500, I don't even know. But it's kind of a canned solution, and it's just not going to fit a lot of people. And I would tell you, while I have lots and lots of clients who don't have large, complicated estates, and they all need an estate plan, our sweet spot in terms of the clientele we think we add the most value for are probably similar to the ones that are your ideal clients. They're business owners. They've got a lot going on. A lot of them have estate tax problems. They've got employees. They've got trucks on the road. They've got just a lot happening. And you just can't address all of those needs through LegalZoom, cranking out a will. Even, like I think about a sole business owner. One of my best friends owns a pretty successful business here in town, done really well for himself, about 100 employees. Could he go on LegalZoom and do an estate plan? Yeah, he probably could. And maybe it would generally work okay, but he's got a unique asset. Mm-hmm. He's the sole owner of a pretty large corporation with 100 employees. Mm-hmm. And so, when we do an estate plan like that, it includes specialized provisions to kind of do some preliminary business succession planning because of those unique needs. Now he's also got all kinds of other stuff going on that we address from the legal perspective. But those canned solutions, very much like in your industry, maybe fit kind of the most basic need, whereas you guys are operating up here, and that's where you're doing your best work. The same applies for us.
Yeah. Well, so I take that a step further, applying it to the insurance industry. So a lot of what we get from even the business owner, in some cases, because they've been trained for so long by our industry, is we'll come in and start to work with them, and it's like, well, no, here's my insurance policies. Just quote me apples to apples, right? And we battle that just constantly of trying to change that thinking, because they always just think that we're going to try to, we're going through this process to sell them more, whatever their preconceived notions are. I'm sure that you guys deal with something similar. I'd just be curious, again, trying to relate it to kind of your process, and how you would view that as that situation, I guess.
Yeah, I think that I don't particularly run into like this issue too much at this point in my career, being where I'm at with the firm I'm at and the platform we're working from and the clientele we deal with. I don't feel like I'm fighting this battle against commoditization. And maybe that's just because I'm fortunate where we're at and we have a certain kind of clientele, and we're operating at a higher level than the estate planner that's got the corner law office. Yeah. Because those guys that are kind of serving the average Joes that have fairly simple estates certainly don't have estate tax problems. They're just cranking out basic wills and trusts all day, probably basic wills, powers of attorney, real simple estate plans, right? Mm-hmm. That's just not the area in which I'm operating. And fortunately, I'm working from a platform where I'm not battling that kind of commoditization issue. Mm-hmm. One area where I think, and maybe we're getting a little bit off topic, but like
all topics on the table,
where you guys, I think, could kind of begin to really get this message heard, is if we can get you in front of like certain groups of business owners. Mm-hmm. And they're out there. Mm-hmm. They're out there. You met with at least one of them here recently, and I don't know that you got off the ground with it, but like you get into the EOs, the YPOs of the world. If you can connect with one, that message spreads. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it feels like maybe you're getting some momentum behind what you're doing and the way you're doing it.
Absolutely.
some thoughtful business owners.
Yeah.
Because it is. I mean, that's a pretty small subset of the population, and a lot of them talk to each other. So it's like once you kind of can get one domino to fall, like all of a sudden you find you're working with a lot of like-minded people, and those referrals are meaningful referrals coming from another business owner.
Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, that's what, I think that's what fuels our passion, at least partly, is that, I mean, we joke all the time how easier it would be to call a business owner and say, hey, do you need X, Y, and Z product? Because we could probably provide it to you cheaper and quicker, right?
Yeah.
And go in and roll that, and then, bring the model later. After, like, we're basically, I use the analogy of being a ninja, right? It's like, let's just give them what they think we are, and then let's show them. But our egos are too big, and we're like, no, it's not the right way. But the uphill resistance that we fight of going into these companies that have like a preconceived notion of, and it's not their fault. It's 150 plus years of bullshit.
Product-driven industry.
Yeah. That it takes us 45 minutes to just try to change their thought process on how they're viewing risk management, to start having a real conversation about value to the company, about risks outside of insurance and what you can fix with an insurance product, about how a risk manager should be at the table with the accountant, the attorney, the financial planner, everybody else, because as you mentioned, like, everyone's dealing with risk.
So,
like,
Ellerbrock Norris isn't a brand new company, and you got 1,500, 2,000 clients out there, lots of business owners. How are and I can understand you're walking in to meet with a prospective client, a new business owner for the first time, and you're trying to, tell them about this new way of viewing risk management and whether you can, advance the conversation or not. But what are you doing with the existing 1,500 or 2,000 clients? How are you? Are you kind of revisiting the risk conversation with them, and how's that going?
We're having way more success with clients that have been with us, but we face some of the same resistance. There's no doubt.
Yeah,
because they're hearing it.
Yeah,
from our competitors. They're hearing it on the TVs. Like, they don't know anything. Or, somebody will call on them from a personal lines perspective and say, hey, we can save you X amount of money on your home or auto, or just let me shop your home and auto. And they've got a $10 million business that then follows that personal lines out the door, because they're like, oh, well, if they save me however much money on my personal lines, then they can save me that on my company. And they still, like, the onus probably falls back on us. Like, we haven't done a good enough job of really trying to get them to see the light, that it's not always about price. It's always a factor, but it's not always the factor.
We've had a lot more success, certainly, with current clients, because there is a trust factor there.
Yeah. And the door's kind of already open to the conversation.
Absolutely. But I have said before that I think the conversation is sometimes harder with those clients. Like, once you get them there, you have way more success. But initiating that conversation, sometimes it's like, wait a second, why are we doing something different?
Yeah.
Like,
this has worked pretty
it's
well
worked
so far for 15 years.
Why are we doing anything different? And you're like, because, and you just have to explain that transition. You got to be prepared to walk through why it's a better model. But there is that, like, why fix it if it's not broke? And what you have to make them understand that it's either broke or going to be broke at some point. And so I think once those clients that we have been able to make that transition with, they're just much more bought in quicker, because there is that trust factor. But it is that initial conversation is still difficult with them because of that.
I mean, we've trained.
Sounds like you need some client testimonials.
Oh yeah. Well,
We've trained
Big Al back there wants to do some video testimonials bad.
we've trained our staff to literally have what we call repositioning statements when they're asking questions outside of the normal scope of what we would have asked a decade ago, right? That's like, hey, update me on your home value and da 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 da. Make sure we're on the same page, right? And we get outside of that wheelhouse. I'm just going to use personal lines as an example. And we get outside of that wheelhouse and we start asking questions about their life and what's going on with their family, and we're starting to ask them about like, oh, well, are your kids getting ready to drive? And, you know, we're looking at how their risk profile is changing. And then we might be getting into some areas around financial planning and things like that, because again, if you're going to be a risk advisor and you want to look at things holistically, you got to broaden the scope of questions. We literally have repositioning statements written down that's like, hey, so the client goes, well, hey, I mean, we've been working together for 7 years. Why do you need to know this now? What's changed? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, well, and I was wondering, like, okay, well, how do you come to a client and say, we're trying to change the perspective on risk management. We need to look at this more holistically. And their response is, haven't you been looking at it holistically for the past 10 years that we've been working with you?
Right.
And that's where it is difficult, I think, the initial conversation to get clients to realize it. But once you do, again, then it's typically much quicker. They're bought in. They trust us, so they understand, like, all right, if you're telling me I need to go through this, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and go through it. And then once they get to the other side, it's like, you know, your guys' process of
the light bulb clicks.
Yeah.
Well, and there's something to be said about just being like, well, listen, we are trying to improve what the insurance industry is bringing to bear.
Yeah.
Work with us through this. I think you'll kind of appreciate it on the backside.
Totally.
And that will buy you a hell of a lot of credibility.
Well, that's just it. It's like, I'd rather be on this end of it and having to go to the client and say, hey, Brandon, like, we're evolving. We're changing. It's for your benefit.
Yeah.
100%. And, you know, if the client doesn't agree, then there's a place for those clients. Probably somewhere else. But, you know, like, we're just, which is a whole nother conversation that's interesting to get into, because we start talking about, you know, profitability and service models and how we handle, like, how do we run a business? And, you know, we talk about that quite a bit on here. Like, okay, so you're a transactional risk management guy and you want to be an advisor. It's like, there's a shitload more that goes into that than changing a conversation that changes with a client.
Yeah.
You've got to adjust all your back end. And there's going to be some clients that we go out and we ask 4 times over the last 2 years about having a holistic risk management conversation with us, and they're like, nah, man, just give me the cheapest you got.
Yeah, and it changes, like, what you need to be prepared to, the questions you need to ask, your education, your connections with other professionals. Like, you got to be ready to kind of shift that approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I've worked obviously with you a lot, and it's like, you know, you've referred a number of clients to us, quite a number of clients, because it's like you're cognizant of the fact that estate planning and business succession planning is an area that clients need to address, or financial planning, or whatever the case may be. But if you've been a pure play, product-driven, transactional insurance salesperson, like, I would imagine most of those people are not equipped to say, oh, I can identify that area of need for you, client, and here's somebody who you can go talk to, because I have a relationship with that person in that other industry that can help solve that problem for you and manage that little area of risk.
Yeah.
Yep. What? We're good.
In cases, it can be a risk.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you wouldn't believe how many times we get the objection that I'm not gonna introduce them to anybody because I'm just like, if they screw it up, I lose a relationship.
Yeah.
which is what happens in a transactional model. You don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like,
That's the problem.
But
right there.
even if you do have a relationship, there's risk when you introduce others.
There is.
So yeah, you got to make sure you
There's
know who
an
you're
ROI
working
on
with,
it,
and
Vet it,
I guess going back to the point, you have to have spent some time and energy getting to know somebody and developing confidence and trust
Correct.
that other professional is going to be able to deliver and make you look like a star for introducing a client to them.
Yeah.
Well, I
Which
know
that's
that-
time and energy those guys are putting into it. That's well outside of what's going to
Totally.
put food on the table or enable them to buy that boat.
Right. That's the whole point, is it's like the people that are worried about that are the people that, aren't doing it anyway. So,
Well, but it's also an investment in yourself, because I know that you guys, obviously you mentioned we work a lot together, but you guys have a similar model in that, bring the right team to the table. We don't have to be the experts in everything, but we want to know who those experts are so that we can help advise the client on where to go and how to get that advice that they need. And that's one thing that we've talked a lot about on the show is, this transitioning from this model of being a product salesperson to an advisor can seem like climbing Mount Everest, right? Like, I don't even know where to start. And sometimes we just talk about start with small steps, get educated on, find a firm like you guys that knows estate planning, wealth transfer, everything that you guys do, and say, how can I go out and ask my clients about this? I feel like this is a big need they have. This is a big problem. How could I go out, vet it, but then go out and ask your clients about it. And then you have a solution to bring to them that now all of a sudden makes you bigger and broader than what you were
Right.
just selling a product.
Right.
And I'd just be curious, kind of wrapping up, how, like, your perception over the years on building those relationships and kind of how you guys have done it with other advisors, and just any, tips or thoughts for folks that are trying to kind of broaden that scope with other people in their network that they could bring to clients.
Yeah, it's interesting. The work that I do, on kind of the personal planning side of things, it's certainly kind of the higher
Yeah.
end of the market. I have had the good fortune of working with lots and lots and lots of investment advisors, CPAs, life insurance professionals. So there's tons of connections with other professional advisors. You take kind of the financial side of the picture. I mean, this. There's a million investment advisors out there, financial advisors, and there's some good ones and there's some not so good ones. And it takes time, frankly, to kind of figure out who you feel like you could trust, who you would invest your own money with, who's operating at a higher level and kind of playing in the same world you are. And it does take time and a huge investment to kind of get that comfort level, like, oh, okay, I can send somebody to Ryan and I don't have to be involved. I know they're going to be in good hands.
Yeah.
And I guess, our firm, we're like pure play legal. That's all we do. We do not try and cross kind of into anybody else's field. It makes it easy because I shouldn't be a threat to anybody. I do one thing and that's it.
Yep.
You got to be a little careful about kind of who plays in different sandboxes, but it takes a long time to figure out who's good in each field. And then when you do have a client that has a need, kind of going through in your mind, or frankly, this is what I do when somebody needs a CPA. I sort my contacts by who's marked as a CPA, and I'm like, okay, who has the horsepower, who has the right personality, who's the right age, is there a specific industry focus here? And I like trying to narrow down the funnel to the two people that I say, well, you should talk to this person and this person, and I have history with these two people, and I know they're going to be in good hands. Short of getting out there and meeting a lot of people, and one, doing kind of that gut check, is this somebody I'd want to work with if I were the client? Two, hopefully having the opportunity to have worked with them over time on clients.
Yep.
Over time, you do develop kind of this short list of people in each of the industries where you'd say, go see them. They're going to take care of you. And I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to babysit it.
Yep. Yeah,
so
no,
if you're new, kind of going back to Elliot's question a little bit,
15 years ago for you.
Yeah, and you're trying to become more of an advisor in the risk management space. Like, how would you go about doing that? I think that's kind of what we're getting at, is like, how do you leave this transactional world that there's probably a ton of pressure for you to live in, right? From, like, I know specific firms in town right now that have been acquired this year that are getting massive pressure to sell product.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, but I'm also like getting my internal tug that I need to be more of an advisor, and I know I need to be broadening out my risk management conversations. How do I start to walk down the road of becoming more of an advisor? And I think some of the things that you hit on are important from the standpoint of, like, go out and meet people like yourself who have massive credibility in your space and get to know you and, like, have conversations with you, be proactive and create those relationships to match clients up with. But, like, what else can a young, or I don't know why we say young,
Yeah,
but young or old, whoever who's like living in this transactional world, wanting to become more of a holistic risk management operator? What operator? Do you have any advice?
Yeah. So I think what I would suggest there is you probably go out and you identify kind of the main professional advisory areas: legal, tax and accounting, insurance, financial. Those are the four that I'd say kind of right off the top of my head I can think of.
Yep.
Figure out what contacts you have in those industries, and think about kind of the most reputable ones you can think of. And I'd try and go out and have lunch and say, okay, this is what I want to try and kind of change the focus of my practice from purely transactional, product driven to more kind of holistic planning. That's a big thing, like a big kind of buzzword, right?
Yeah.
Collaborative, holistic type planning. And say, okay, who are the top 5 practitioners that you're aware of, investment advisor, that kind of work with, the best clients, the most complicated ones. Tell me who are the top 5 besides yourself, for example, in that industry. And you'll begin to develop, I think, a short list of the main kind of centers of influence, the main players in each of those industries. And I try and go meet with each of them, and you begin to develop, the conversation a little bit more. And my guess is that's how you kind of figure out who's operating at a higher level, who's interested in playing in the sandbox with other like-minded people.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Thanks. Great advice.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting the signal from Big Al, the secret signal that we gotta wrap it up. But yeah.
Man, that was a blast.
That was fun.
Honestly, yeah.
Great conversation. I think
Thanks for
that's good for everybody to think about a lot of those things that we talk about, because again, you're in the industry of providing advice. So thanks for coming on, and we'll have to do it again.
Yep. Talk soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.